Welcome to another edition of the Litigation Psychology Podcast brought to you by Courtroom Sciences. Dr. Steve Wood, joining me fresh off his speaking tour in what appeared to be cold and snowy Wisconsin is Dr. Bill Kanasky.
Yeah, it's that time of year. But it is what it is. I survived. Boy, listen, I lived in Chicago for 15 years. I remember like the first time it snows for the season, like everybody's an idiot. Like people just forget how to drive in the snow. And so there's this car sliding off the road. It's really dangerous. Not even a lot of snow, just like an inch is all it takes to make things nuts. I'm assuming you don't get snow in College Station.
I do not get snow, no, but obviously growing up in Michigan, I'm used to it, or at least I was used to it, and I don't miss it. So
Do you travel back up there and then have to drive in it? It's like,
no, luckily I don't go up there at this time. I know enough to stay away.
so you smartened up.
Yeah, exactly. Not to mention too, I get cold in 40-degree, 50-degree weather. So I'm like those SEC players with the
Oh,
heating.
I'm terrible. I'm terrible. Like my family, it was like, 50 degrees out the other morning. And like my family's like, "Can we make a fire?" Like it's 50 degrees. Come on. Can we
I
put the
mean,
heat on? I'm like, geez, terrible. Yeah, That's why I moved to Florida, man. I have to deal with this stuff.
exactly.
Uh,
Well,
I do have,
Bill,
I do have, I do have quite the update.
what's the update?
I do have quite the update. So, for those that have been listening to this podcast for what now, 3.5, 4 years, um, and you know my son, my older son, very well, Billy, who's pretty much a complete slob, right? We've established this on the podcast, right? He's
Chick-fil-A boxes.
23. He's been a slob for a long time. He must get this from his mother because I'm the neat freak. I'm not a slob. And I tell you, his room's always just a crazy mess. I remember I had to borrow his car, and I had to put the windows down because it just smelled like ass, right? It was just awful, right? I don't know how this kid lives like this. And then when he borrows my car, like his car's in the shade, he borrows my car, then my car smells like ass. It's all I can't have this, right? So I had a couple tools over across the street here in the former man cave, now where he's living, and so I had to go pick up so I walk in his room. It's like spotless, like vacuumed and bed made, and like, wow, it smelled good. I think, yeah, I think he like had a candle. I was like, okay, all right, whatever. I didn't think much of it, and then wifey had to borrow my truck, or she took it over to my neighbor's. My neighbor had to move something, so yeah, borrow my truck. So I had to go to the gym, and so I borrowed his Jeep. Steve, I get in the Jeep. It's like it's been professionally detailed. I mean, there's not one speck of dust. It's phenomenal. There's no garbage on the floor, and it smells great. I'm going,
I have a
like, what
feeling I know
the
where this
hell?
is going.
And
There
then
has
I
to be
fi-
some
then
art
I
going on.
figured it out. He's got a girlfriend.
There you go.
Aha. So, needless to say, he's very well groomed. His laundry's done. I kind of like the upsides of this. I really hope this works out.
She sounds like a keeper.
I mean, I hope it works out because I really, really like this version of him. Like Steve, everything's clean, and I mean clean. It's it's exceptional.
So good for Billy.
Yeah, well, you better have a few more years on those issues. So yeah, enjoy yours while they're a little bit younger, but then you're going to start to deal with all this stuff. And I listen, as your consultant slash therapist, I will be here. I will be here for you to provide counseling, whatever it takes to get you through those moments.
Well, that's good because I'm going to need you for some counseling today, which is why I brought you on to do viewer mail. Right? Usually, you're the one doing the viewer mail. I've been collecting some viewer mail, so I thought, hey, I'm going to reverse the roles here and ask you some questions that we keep getting all the time.
I really love viewer mail. I really do. We've had some rough ones too, but that's okay. Hey, listen, we answer them all. So you may not like it. You may not like the answer. Got a few stories about that recently, but yeah, you got plenty of stories. I may just go off at any moment in this. Like I may just rant at some point during
That's
this
what
episode. Just be ready.
I'm
I'm
fully
triggered,
expecting it.
man. I'm triggered.
I see that. Well, I'm going to start right from the jump, and this might really start the trigger. But one of the things we've been hearing a lot, and we get a lot of questions on, is I have a case. Confidentiality is an issue. Do I use fake names or do I use the real names? I have some thoughts on this, but what do you say?
Steve, 23 years of doing this. I have seen the fake name strategy implemented 100 times. Okay. Trial counsel. Here's the record for actually maintaining that throughout a project. Focus group mock trial. Record 0 for 100.
Yes.
0 victories, 100 defeats.
And we
It
just had one,
typically
right?
doesn't
We
even last an hour, Steve, and somebody blurts out the name, and then you and I had this recently. Is okay, fine. So say the attorneys actually use the fake names, and then they're going through the exhibits during the mock trial, and then they forget to they they forget to sanitize the exhibit, and then the real names on the goddamn exhibit. It's like, folks, oh, listen, I've never seen it fully work. I've seen some great attempts.
yeah.
I have seen some fantastic attempts. Steve, I've seen a couple mock trials that literally went deep into the fourth quarter. And like the attorneys were in the red zone, ready to cross the goal line, and then they fumbled on the 3-yard line during closing argument of the mock. It's just like it's almost impossible. I understand why folks want to do that. Yeah, I have some thoughts on that. Number one, uh, if you're that worried about confidentiality, go to a surrogate venue. Not right, not number one. But number two, and I know sometimes it's the people, I get that you're trying to protect people's identities. Other times it's the entity. It's like, so our clients like, they don't want to know, or I'm sorry, we don't want them to know which hospital it is. So we're going to use Memorial Hospital, right? Well, I think maybe you want to test your hospital's reputation at the jury level. I mean, these folks are signing extraordinarily. I mean, we've showed attorneys our confidentiality contract. It's really, really thorough. We figuratively, sometimes literally, beat them over the head with it as far as the importance of the confidentiality. And I know it makes certain people paranoid, but I mean, in most cases, though, I think you should just use the real names, unless there's some exceptional circumstance. What have your experiences been?
Yeah, that's been mine, other than the fact that it becomes really difficult. And we've seen a lot of good attempts and get really close. Or
Yeah,
we've seen them where they screw up at the very beginning. But I mean, I think the biggest thing to your point is you might want to test who your client is. I just did one
yeah,
recently where we didn't tell them who it was to see how they got to read. And then we turned around and told them who it was because initially the thought was, well, if they know who this is, it could be bad for us. But in this situation, it was actually good for them because they found out that people had a positive view of this entity. So knowing that it was them was actually a positive. So I think I always would err on the side of going with real names for several different reasons. But I think even more so to your point, if it's an entity that it might actually be good for you, then you'd want to know, or bad, you want to know.
yeah. I mean, I think I mean, if your adversary is doing a focus group, which they probably are, what do you think they're doing?
Right.
Right. And so, because I think, listen, so for example, you're a plaintiff attorney and you got a lot of time and money in the case, you're probably going to use real names because you want to figure out, wow, is the reputation of this hospital system going to be too much for me to overcome? Right. So, like, on the other side, they don't give a shit. I think it's just a little bit of paranoia probably on the defense side that where how many times have you heard? We don't want the plaintiff attorneys hearing about this.
Yeah. Right.
Wait, what is this? I don't understand that.
I
I
guess
don't know.
there's been thoughts where maybe one of the potential jurors runs and tells the plaintiff that they did a mock trial or a focus group is the thought. So at least from what I've heard.
Steve, people listen, people can't stick to an exercise or diet program, much less have the effort and energy to go reach out to plaintiffs. I mean, come on, Steve, we have apps on our phone to bring food to us because we're that lazy.
Yeah, don't even get me started on that rant. The
But people are
DoorDash
but
is
people are gonna I gotta run to the plaintiff's office and rat out this hospital system for doing a mock trial. Get out of here. Oh, I almost dropped the F bomb.
yeah, don't do that. We
Oh,
don't want
I
the heat.
almost dropped the F bomb. It's close. Close.
Well, let's move
Get
on
the.
before you do drop the F bomb on this. We're starting off good. I can only imagine as we
I wonder
dig
if we could
deeper.
sneak it by. If we didn't tell me, it's kind of snuck it by.
They always find out. All right, second question. We've been doing a lot of, we do in-person mock trials, in-person focus groups. We've been doing our online case assessment panels. And one of the questions always comes up is, do I advocate or do I present neutrally? So the couple things on that, and then there's also some pitfalls on advocating neutrally as well. But we'll start with the fact is, what do you think? Advocate, present neutral, or does it depend?
Well, I think it depends on the goal of the research, right? Um, if you are in a case assessment mode, you want to explore juror reactions to your case facts and to the arguments. I would say educate, don't advocate. Okay. Because what you want, I mean, and again, you and I aren't going to get too far into statistics here, but you want validity, right? Meaning you want to measure what you think you're measuring, meaning you want a clean, I call it a clean read. Okay, a clean read. It's like, anytime you go for a blood test or you got to pee in a cup, right? What do? I mean, they clean everything, right? Because they don't want it contaminated with something else, right? It's the same thing with this. And the problem is when you advocate, personalities can contaminate and you won't get a clean read. Now, the exception to this would be if you're like pre-trial. You are pre-trial and you are in trial prep mode. And you've already evaluated your case via the focus group model, which you did not advocate, you educated and you evaluated. And now you want to practice your advocacy skills against a skilled opponent, maybe one of your law firm partners who's going to role play the other side. And you want to prepare for trial by advocating in a mock trial for trial prep purposes. Now I think you're good. Okay. But I think when you're in the case assessment phase, the last thing you want are any types of personalities screwing up your clean read. That's my take on it. Now here's the problem, which you and I have faced over and over and over and over again, particularly over the last year. You attorneys, we love you, but it's really hard not to argue. It's
Yeah.
because I'm like, just teach like you're a law professor. It's like, I can't. I'm an attorney. All I do is argue. So yeah, so you kind of have to learn how to be an educator, give more of a neutral educational presentation to jurors, and take a deep dive into educating them on, what the evidence is, what the facts are. Now, to that extent, you certainly want to define the arguments on both sides without injecting argument, right? Because then you don't want emotion or again any type of persuade. You don't need persuasion to test the case. In fact, that's what's going to screw up your clean read is
Yeah.
persuasion. I tell you, I did a mock trial. I did a mock trial in Chicago. Steve, this is 18 years ago, and a 40-year veteran attorney for the mock trial is going to be himself. He's defending the hospital system in downtown Chicago. Okay. The person who is the role playing the plaintiff attorney was a fourth year associate. How do you think that went?
I can imagine it was a bloodbath on the defense side.
Yeah, 3 defense verdicts, right? It's like, no, if you're gonna put yourself in that situation where you're gonna have advocacy and true argument, it really needs to be equal, if not even favored towards the, hey, there's a question for you. I kind of like it when the lead defense attorney in a mock trial plays the plaintiff attorney. I think that's where you get your best shot. They know the case best. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I definitely agree that you want, because the goal, right, we've always talked about is to essentially give the best plaintiff's case and even lose
Yeah.
the mock trial or the focus group rather than win it. So, yeah, I'm always a strong proponent of whoever that lead attorney is, get them on the plaintiff side because more than likely they probably are the more skilled advocate. But the other thing I think it does too is it forces that lead attorney to get into the mindset of the plaintiff to see the arguments, because how many times have we heard these defense attorneys, when they have to play the plaintiff side, they start to see how strong some of these arguments are, that when they were looking at it from the defense side, they thought they were weak. But once they had to shift the mindset and argue it, they're like, well, maybe this isn't as weak as what we thought it was.
Yeah, and okay, so I'm gonna go on a little mini rant here. Yeah, you and I have seen a massive shift from the mock trial methodology shifting over to the focus group methodology. I think this is one of the reasons. I think there's a couple reasons for this. Um, and I don't mind it. I don't mind it at all. Because number one, I don't think one type of project is necessarily better than the other. I think that they're different types of projects. Um, I've heard a couple things, and we go. There's a couple of plaintiff attorneys down in Texas who shall go unnamed, where we've had clients say we don't want to do a mock trial, we want to do a focus group because we know we cannot replicate that attorney
Yeah,
in a mock trial setting. Their personalities just you can't. There's nothing close to it, so we want to test the focus group model. I also think the focus groups are, I mean, they're very jury centric. They're so interactive. They're town hall meeting style. You're talking to these jurors. What people forget, a mock trial is attorney centric. It's just attorneys talking all day, just like a real trial. Like you don't hear from these mock jurors until the very end, and then when you hear from them, everyone wants to get the hell out of there. They're exhausted. So you're collecting data all day, but you're not really hearing from them. So I do see this continued and steady shift towards the focus group model. But again, I really like the focus group model because again, we take persuasion, right, and the advocacy out of it, and you take a more educational slant. I think you get that more of the clean read where you're eliminating a lot of potential contamination. I mean, imagine doing a $75,000 mock trial and you get shitty data because one of the people, right, doing the presenting is not a really good presenter and the other one is. And then all your data comes back shit, right? I mean, it's back to your attorney credibility thing. If you've got a major imbalance, it's going to throw off the data.
absolutely.
So,
And another thing we see that throws off the data, one more on this, and then we'll move on. But the idea when you're doing it neutrally, one thing we always have to remind people is when you're given the plaintiff side, don't say plaintiff's going to argue. And then all of a sudden, when you start presenting your case, you
we,
use a lot of we.
yeah, I've seen worse slips,
Yeah.
but still, that we're doing a lot of, I mean, we're still doing mock trials, but a lot more focus groups. And I got to tell you, I think I would say 90% of the feedback, not just from clients, not just from the insurance company or the corporate client, but from the trial attorneys, I think far prefer the the focus group model because of the level of interaction with the jurors. The amount of interaction they get is just not even close to the mock trial. I think they really appreciate that and like that. They like that kind of constant being able to bounce things off them, the constant questions from the jurors. What questions do they have, which you'd never get in the mock trial format. So, I think both are really important, right? But we do see the shift towards the focus group, and I'm all for it. I think it's great.
No, I agree. Sticking with the mock trial focus group format, a lot of times we hear this. I have this evidence and I'm not sure if it's going to come in. And if it comes in, it could be bad, but I'm not sure. What do I do? What are your thoughts on this evidence that may or may not come in? Do you include it? Do you not include it in a mock trial or
Yeah,
focus group?
yeah. So there's two ways to do this. There's the right way and then the kind of the shitty way. The shitty and traditional way is you don't put it in. And then once you've collected all your data at the end of the project, you go, oh, by the way, right? What if I told you
Right.
X? How would that change your decision? That is maybe an example of the worst science possible. I'm not even sure that is science, but you cannot unring the bell, right? Because that's just not how people make decisions. So anytime you're testing something at the end of a project, that's really not an effective way, because once people have made their decisions, they feel certain ways about certain things. There's a massive order effect on how each piece of evidence is delivered. And you throw something in at the end and go, well, would this change your mind? That's really it's an impossible thing to measure. And I don't think you get very accurate data. The right way to do it is you do the project twice. Now, the first barrier to that is, well, you got to pay for two projects. Well, yeah, yeah, you're right. But if the demand on your case is $25 million, is it worth doing two projects to figure out how you're going to try? And it's not just with evidence that comes in or out. It's do I want to attack? Do I want to attack the plaintiff? Right?
Yeah.
Do I want to, from a culpability standpoint, do I want to go after the plaintiff, or is that going to backfire on me? Well, you do it, do project one and go at it, and do project two and back off and see if there are differences in the results. Damages arguments, I think is big. We do a lot of it's my favorite type of project. We do these all the time. I do this by focus group too. It's the test retest model. Day one, you can test a certain damages argument from both sides and then tweak that to do it the next time, based on the jury reaction from project one. That is the best form of science, because that's how it's defined. You look at any science, whether it be medical science, psychological science, repeated testing is how you end up getting the right answers. And the same applies to litigation science.
Yeah, and I agree. And in this instance, I also 100% agree. If you can do a test retest, do it. I mean, of course, sometimes you get pushback on being able to do that. And I would always argue in that situation, then you might as well just put it in
Throw it
there.
all in.
Yeah, throw
Yeah.
it in rather than. And I wholeheartedly agree that I don't like the idea that it's the what if I told you that. I mean, we have it too often where we do that, and whether it's about evidence or what if I told you the plaintiff did this or what if I told you the defendant did that, would that change your opinion? And a lot of times witness or jurors say no, but you don't really
Yeah.
know because they don't want to admit. Everybody strives for consistency, so they don't want to then say I've been talking about this all day, I made this decision, and had I known that, I would have made a different decision. They can't even process that in the moment to know whether they would or they wouldn't. So you get
Yeah.
you get jurors that say that wouldn't have mattered, so you think it doesn't matter. But if you'd have put it in there, you would have found out that it might have actually mattered.
No, I totally agree with that. And we're seeing more of the test retest, even in the focus group model. And again, we've done some more focused focus groups that are more streamlined, where the cost is not the barrier anymore, because these are shorter projects. They kind of get right to the heart of the matter. And you can do a couple of those and still be under the budget of doing one of these traditional, full day projects, particularly if you do it virtually. So I think some of the best strides that we're making in the litigation science arena is being able to do the test retest to figure out, to really scientifically figure out what's the best way to get our arguments together. What are our best themes? How aggressive can and should I be? What damages model is going to be most effective? Or are they going to think we're cheapskates and get mad at us, stuff like that? The ability to find those answers I think is really important, and we're pretty much doing that every week now.
And you kept mentioning about doing things virtually. That's another question that comes up, right? Do I do things in person or virtually? And this might be whether it's witness training or if it's mock trials and focus groups. I think I'd be curious on that because I know a big thing is a lot of people ask us for online mock trials, which we don't do. Um,
Disaster. We
yeah,
tried that. We uh,
yeah,
we
and
we we tried that. It was an epic disaster. Um, Shitty data. And if you're doing online mock trials, um, God help you, because I just scientifically don't believe in them based on what I saw from our experience, experiments of doing those, around the COVID time. However, here's a couple things that we learned, and these are absolutely positively true statements. Number one, witness training for deposition is highly effective via Zoom. We've had great success with that. Not a problem. Some exceptions, some exceptions. If you have a witness that has some pretty severe emotional reactions to litigation, and it may be better to be in person just for some more emotional support, right? That may be an exception, to the rule on that. But otherwise, um, uh, virtual witness training, highly, highly effective. Now, for trial prep, I hate virtual.
me too.
I hate virtual
Right.
because it's a different animal, and these jurors are going to have to talk to these witnesses are going to have to talk to jurors in person. So I really push for in-person training for trial prep, but really not for depth prep. So I think that's kind of our official stance on that, and I think we've again experienced great success with how we're doing things. So that's what I like to follow with the jury research. The other thing that we learned was that doing the focus group research virtually was highly effective, um, because it's like doing a staff meeting at our firm or the law firm, right? You're getting 15 people in the same Zoom room and having a discussion. It's been highly effective. Now, some of the times you're going to want to move it to in person. Okay, there's going to be some times where you're probably going to want to do in person. I think the number one time is if you have a complex case that has multiple defendants, you should probably do that in person just because it's gonna take more time. There's a lot of moving parts, and you can't really streamline stuff like that. It's too damn complicated. And you may even have to go a day and a half, 2 days, right? You get a case where there's three defendants. Well, you have to put on cases for all three of those. It's kind of hard to pull that off virtually because you just don't have the time and it gets really confusing. And so that I think that's kind of the time where we tend to push for the in-person focus groups, and then pretty much 100% of the mock trials we do are um, are in person because the in-person way and the way the juries deliberate, as you know as well as I do, Steve, when it comes to deliberate, see if you're in a town hall discussion, people be honest with you in a town hall discussion, right? But a deliberation's different. And we've seen this a number of times where people sit, when you're physically next to somebody and they disagree with you. Well, there's a lot of personality factors that take over. There are no keyboard muscles, and people change based on like how people are physically located, in the room, and human behavior just drastically changes when you're in person versus when you're virtual. Like there's no consequence, right? There's no consequence virtually. People are different virtually when it comes to a deliberation, type of decision. So it's much better to do those in person, whereas with the focus groups, you're okay virtually.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point is yeah, the in-person is a little bit more expensive. People like to do the online because it saves them a little bit of money, but it all goes back to one, the dynamics of the jurors being in the same room.
Yeah,
And then it goes back to the data that you're getting. As you said earlier, if you get shit data, garbage in, garbage out,
yeah.
is it really worth it on a $25 million case to save a few bucks to do it online versus getting it in person to be able to make sure you have good data and you have, good results that you can use going forward.
Yeah, so I mean, when clients call, we just kind of say, okay, well, let's lay out let's see what makes the most sense, not what's most expensive or what's cheapest. What type of answers are you looking for? And then let's plan the study, around that. Steve, with our more sophisticated cases, for example, if you do have a case that's more complex, we have just introduced essentially, I wouldn't call this test retest, but oftentimes now we are starting with a virtual focus group to just get a read, right? So I call this the getting the X-ray before you go to the MRI machine, right? And so the virtual focus group serves as the X-ray, right? You're getting a basic look at the case facts. What do jurors understand? What do they don't understand? How are they reacting to the dash cam video or the pictures or the police body cam? And getting an initial read on that, and then taking those results, okay, and then doing your in-person project where you can then tweak how you do it. So when you do that, which so the mock trial, the in-person mock trial, the in-person focus group, we'll call that the MRI in our medical analogy. That the accuracy and the validity and the reliability of that second project will be much higher because you got through all the messy stuff in the first project. And so, I mean, Steve, in your career, how many, this is a really tough question for you, but be honest. I mean, how many just like really shitty mock trials have you seen? Because that was really the first time they were testing anything. And they spent a lot of money and you figured out, wow, jurors didn't understand much of what you
Yeah.
said because you didn't really know how would they react. Where if they would have done the look kind of the mini, for lack of a better term, the mini focus group first, they would have figured that out, right? And so then when they do the in-person project, that's longer, it's more expensive. They would have done it in a much, much better way because they did the first project to figure out, how did jurors think about this? How often does that happen with you?
It happens more often than I would like to say, because I think it ends up being a lot of the recommendations we say is
Yeah.
jurors didn't understand A, B, and C. You need to spend more time educating them on that. But to your point, you could have found that out before and then educated them on it and used your mock trial more
Yeah, I
informatively.
don't I think the last thing any client needs or any trial attorney needs is more questions than answers
Yeah.
after those projects. And everybody we've worked with, at first I think there's kind of some grumbling like, oh God, we got to do two projects. Well, yeah, and then by the time you get to the end of it, what everybody is saying, particularly the trial attorneys were, boy, I'm so thankful we did that first mini focus group because wow, that really changed the way, we saw this case based on the jury feedback. And so when we did the in-person project, we were way ahead of the game and we got better results because we knew how to present the information in a more, understandable way.
Yeah, I can think of one case specifically where an attorney did that after doing one of our initial onlines where they said, I've got a lot of different things, analogies I can use, things I can
Yeah.
build in to my arguments at the mock trial now because I know what resonates and what doesn't resonate with them. So,
Yeah, that's certainly important stuff. So there's a way to get these answers. You have to work with your consultant and make a good plan.
speaking of answers too, I'm going to switch gears a little bit to witness training. And I know you texted me not too long ago about some issues on that. This goes to document review, how much your witnesses should know. I think we've had conversations before where some attorneys will say, I don't want my witnesses to know anything. I want them to go in there and know just a few things so they can say, I don't know to a lot of things, versus taking the time to go through and show them stuff so that they can reduce the I don't knows. Now, we've talked about that within reason on whether how much they should know and how much they shouldn't know. But what are your thoughts on setting up witnesses to not have answers to questions that plaintiff attorneys will then use against them?
Well, I text you this morning.
Yeah.
And so here's my witness training this morning. We're not going to mention names. Here, I'll use fake names. Like the
Don't
first
blow it.
question you asked me,
Don't
right?
fumble it on the goal line.
So I'm on this witness training, and this is phase two, right? So so the answer is different depending on what type of witness. This is a corporate rep, okay? You got a list of topics. You better have your answers, right? So we get on for session two. So the witness was told, 2 weeks ago, because session one, hey, I'm sending you the share file. Look through the policies, look through the procedures, the training manual. Here's the 3 employee files that we're talking about, blah, 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 blah. Witness gets on today and says, yeah, I didn't get around to reviewing the documents, and then I tried to log on and print, and like something, it wasn't letting me in. It told me to create a password. I tried to create a pass, it didn't work. So this witness today, this is today, a couple hours ago, was just completely unprepared. So the attorney just pretty much went Bobby Knight on him. Or here, let's keep it modern. He went Tom Izzo,
There you go.
your buddy. He went Tom Izzo on him. And I mean, it was just like, Joe, like your dep is in 8 days. Do you know how, like, you didn't call me when you couldn't open the file? You didn't call me. Like, you didn't call, and it ruined the entire session this morning because the attorney was just visibly upset and the witness was not ready. So now he has to figure out the technology part to get things printed out and stuff like that. And then he's got to review. So now they're going to be cutting it close. And now they got to have another session to go over things that he was not prepared for. So I guess my answer is when it comes to a corporate rep, yeah, you better have your shit together, and you don't want any surprises. And plus you're getting a list of topics. You're going to get throttled if you're not ready on documents. Now, with fact witnesses, yeah, I've seen many of defense attorneys. And again, listen, you and I are not attorneys, so I mean, it ain't up to me, and I really don't have a dog in this fight. But I've seen many of trial attorneys purposefully, strategically say, I don't want you reviewing anything because I don't want you to have to answer questions on every, because if you review it, you've got to answer questions. So, like, for example, I know a lot of attorneys, I know it's come up with you, where a different witness has been deposed before them. And oftentimes defense counsel will be like, we can talk about that testimony, and that's protected by attorney-client privilege, but I'm not going to show you the transcript because then you're going to have to answer questions if you're questioned that, hey, it's part of what you reviewed. So I could see that. In other cases, same exact situation. I've seen defense counsel say, no, I want you to review the testimony because I want you to read what the Q&A looks like. Okay. I want you to get familiar with how this questioner asks questions. And then they allow them to, and I guess they take the risk that they may be questioned. I guess my concern overall with a fact witness is that I would imagine a good plaintiff attorney is going to put documents in front of them. And if they haven't reviewed them, a good plaintiff attorney is going to say, okay, well, here, review it now. Take a couple minutes, and review it. And I'm going to ask you questions and kind of force in those questions anyway. I guess when it comes down to it, I'm pretty risk adverse when it comes to witnesses. I think I would, in most cases, as a consultant, I think it's better for the witness. I don't like surprises, Steve. I don't think the human brain responds to surprises well. And if witnesses aren't prepared and then they're being asked to review a document for the first time in the middle of a dep, I think that puts the witness in a very difficult position. And then, like you were saying, if the witness says, "Well, I can't comment on that particular document because I've never seen it before." I mean, theoretically, I guess they could say that, but does that hurt their credibility? I think it's a tough situation that I think every defense counsel probably addresses strategically on a case by case basis.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing. I leave it up to the attorneys to make that decision, but at least, from our perspective of what we think is, and I wrote a paper on this about the whole idea of how jurors view I don't know responses. Obviously in certain instances it's expected to be a fair response, but at the
Yeah.
same time, witness or jurors are going to not like the fact that the witness said, I don't know, 65 times. And I will go back and I won't name names, but both of you and I have had an experience where a savvy plaintiff attorney try to go in
Yeah.
front of a jury and say, ma'am, remember how many times you said, I don't know in your deposition?
Yeah.
Would you be surprised to know it was 75 times,
Yeah.
you know, to try to
So
kill
it
the
can
jury?
play, it's really a double-edged sword, right? So I
Yeah.
guess I guess my final conclusion on this is you gotta weigh the pros and the cons, right? I guess I lean towards the side of I'd rather them review it and ask questions about it than not review it. And then if they do have to review it in the moment, they can make a mistake because they're nervous or they're shocked by the document because they've never, they're threatened by it. Or they rattle off the 73 I don't knows.
Right.
And, you know, and so, well, at least you're not getting inaccurate answers when you say I don't know. It just perceptually can look really bad. So it can play both ways.
Exactly. I got one more for you, and I'm going to cut you loose here, but I'm going to switch gears now to actual trial. And, I heard not too long ago where someone was saying that they were told by someone in the litigation psychology community that jurors make up their decisions by opening statements, and then everything that happens after opening statements is really not important to the case. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's idiotic.
That was kind of my
Yeah. So
response.
that let me tell you again, like the things you and I hear, which we just know are total bullshit, is amazing because we happen to do this for a living. We have all the answers to these questions. So someone had said that, I think jurors make this is during a mock trial, like during the lunch period, when one of the attorneys, we're all eating lunch, the attorney says, yeah, yeah, jurors make up their minds after opening, right? I mean, everybody knows that. And the other attorney goes, I disagree. And I'm like, oh, here, I can't wait to hear what's coming, right? Because I think maybe the correct answer would come up. He goes, no, no, no. They make up their minds in jury selection. I'm like, oh shit, here we go.
It's worse.
So I hate to be the bearer of bad news. Here's what we know. All right, number one, in both jury selection and in opening statements, jurors certainly start leaning in a certain direction. Absolutely. But are they anchored into that lean after the opening statement process? Absolutely not. We see jurors, because we take these measurements, jumping around like jackrabbits during these witnesses, right? And then you get to a certain period and you can just see visually, right? You see the data. I guess what I would say is you see the data calm down, right? You see them jumping around like jackrabbits, and then it kind of settles in, and then they're pretty much, for the most part, I'd say 80% of them, 85% of them are pretty much locked in. And this is before closing. So that's kind of another issue that I said, and I say this during the opening statement speech, CLE, that I give, which people seem shocked. But I tell people, I'm like, listen, people aren't making any decisions during your closing. I hate to break the news to you, right? They've made up, vast majority of them have made up their decision by the closing. And what you're doing in the closing is you're trying to give your jurors ammunition to use in deliberations. You're not convincing anybody of anything in your closing argument. They've already gotten there. So the answer is, during the witness testimony is when these folks really take a position and then finally stick with it. Definitely lean during voir dire and especially the openings. But yeah, it's that, and that's why the witness testimony is so important. And if that goes well for you, you can be in really, really good shape. But even with the great, you've seen this in our data, you could have a spectacular opening statement, and then your witnesses shit the bed, and you're done. I mean, you're done. I mean, you are done. And that's with a great opening statement. So you gotta look at all this stuff and how it impacts each other.
Yeah, and I think, there's probably some jurors who will make up their minds initially, but those are the ones we talk about in our presentations, these cynical jurors or the highly arousable
Yeah.
jurors that will make up their decisions early. Then that comes down to getting rid of them during voir dire, but more often than
Yeah.
not, yeah, we flip floppers and however you want to name them on our data, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, right up until the very end. So Yeah, I always laugh when I hear that, and then when I heard the fact that, you know, someone who does what we do, not at our organization, had told an attorney that, and she asked me about it, and I kind of gave her a similar response to yours, that it's complete BS. But and I think you make a mistake doing that way if you think that that's the way things actually work, right? Because then you're focused so much on your opening statements, and then you're figuring, well, it doesn't really matter how my witnesses perform. It doesn't really matter what evidence comes in. It doesn't matter about us other stuff. I mean, the ship is sailed by opening statements. It's kind of a fatalistic view to go into trial, which is incorrect. So you're setting yourself up for failure there too.
Yeah, I would argue if you had a mediocre opening statement and really good witness testimony, you're going to win. You have a phenomenal opening and your witnesses suck, you're going to lose.
Agree.
So it's best to have both, right? It's best to have both. But yeah, it's and that's why we test. You know, the other good thing about the way we do the testing is you can compare, you know, how the data is moving from witness to witness, right? And so that's very telling. So if a witness testifies, right, in the mock or the focus group, we play video, or they're even live in some instances, and you know, half of the jurors move to one side. Well, that's a pretty telling result that that witness had a huge impact, whether it be positive or negative, right? But then you get a witness that maybe you think's really important, and two people move, and no one else does. Well, what does that tell you? Right? So that's another, you know, reason why you want to test these cases is, you know, which witnesses are actually moving the needle, because you think you know, but you don't know until you know. And that's one of the main things that we want to measure in our projects.
Yep. Good point. I'm gonna finish it on that.
Yep.
Thanks, Phil, for coming on, doing some viewer mail. It was kind of nice to flip the script a little bit here and
Yeah.
put you under the gun on some of these. Thanks to our listeners and everybody who's joined us. Those of you who watch on YouTube, like and subscribe on YouTube. That helps us out. And always go to courtroomsciences.com. All of our blogs, papers, podcasts, all that is up there. Feel free to reach out to me at swood@courtroomsciences.com or Bill at bkanasky@courtroomsciences.com. And join us for another edition of the Litigation Psychology Podcast brought to you by Courtroom Sciences.
That's it.